If you think about a bee is following its desire and calling, quadrant 3, and it's going forth, just blissing out, going from flower to flower. So it's doing what it was built to do and living the life it's created to live. But its purpose, as Steve Jobs said in that beautiful commencement address, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
At MBA Chartered Professional Accountants, we have 3 core beliefs. 1, we believe that business owners are the most important people on the planet. 2, we believe that the traditional accounting firm business model is flawed and fails to serve you. And 3, we believe the MBA way gives you what you truly want and deserve, resources and advice that helps you grow your business and your life. This is the MBA Way podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MBA Way podcast. I'm your host, Eric Solbakken. And today we have someone we've had on before because we didn't get through all the things we wanted to talk about. So we're going to part 2, personal branding, part 2 with Krista Clive-Smith. And so I'm not going to go in through the whole introduction of who you are. We're going to dive right into this. Welcome back to part 2.
Thank you. Well, I'm so thrilled and honored to be here. Thanks again for part 2.
So last time we spoke, we were talking about personal branding and how important it is to your business. And we walked around these concepts of what you do, what you know, what you are, and this kind of through line of being consistent amongst all your business ventures. Now, I'm probably really wrecking this up, but maybe could you just give us a summary of what we talked about last time for the listeners so then we can kind of set the stage for part 2?
Absolutely. So piece 1 of that is the triangle model that we went through, where the base is who you are, one side is what you do, and one side is what you know. Because who you are, what you know, and then how you express it into different vehicles, all wrapped in that yellow wrapper of your attitude, beliefs, and your mindset. Those really define the essence of what people know your personal brand to be in the world. But then we also talked about the model, which is the framework of flipping the org chart so that the company brand isn't the marquee. We're actually going to flip it. We're going to throw an arrow in the middle and then the bubbles underneath. Those represent the what you do. But we really want to focus on gaining value and creating value in the world based on who you are. And that's the part that is the sort of next generation of where we'll take it today, which is for people who are like, well, I've always found validation in the world based on what I do. So how can I even, what does it even mean to add value based on who I am? But if you think about your career, Eric, you think about mine, even I was a competitive figure skater for 19 years. And my identity as a skater was so wrapped up in like who I was as a person without skating. What? That wasn't even on my radar. And then I had a career-ending injury. And in that moment, the glass globe of my identity broke on the ice beside me. And in that, I realized, these things have to be separate. Who I am here has to be separate to what I do, because what I do is going to change over the course of my lifetime. So there has to be consistent value that you add to the world just based on who you are, which for achievers is a hard thing, friends, because so we get that performance-based validation, and that's what makes us feel worthy a lot of times.
And that's from an entrepreneur standpoint, is you create this thing and you get compensated for what you do in the world and what you do in the world and what you do in the world. When that gets pulled out from underneath you, if you're not solid in who you are, that shatters everything like it did with your skating. It did the same thing for me in the accounting profession when all of a sudden I was a partner in a firm and the partnership collapsed. All of a sudden I was like, holy crap, like it's all gone. Now what do I do? So I needed to have that strong fundamental of who I am as the baseline to be able to move to the next phase. I would think about all the next generations coming up too. They're going to be in so many different aspects. My daughter is going to probably be doing some business or industry that we don't even know about yet. She's 12 now, right? And she probably doesn't even know, like, we don't even know what she's going to be doing. So for her to understand who she is such a life skill that's required.
Exactly. And that really is the most important part of what I believe personal branding to be, because that's the only part you get to take with you through this lifetime. So when we build it on the soul plane from a brand DNA standpoint, then so often people think about brands as logos and colors and fonts. That's just the clothing that your brand wears. We're really talking about how do we quantify and define the essence of who you are and communicate that, and then package it in clothing that allows the inner and outer to be aligned.
We could go down so many rabbit holes on that one.
I know
there's a lot to unpack there, especially when, if there's any business owners out there listening to this and going, yeah, but I'm in a traditional industry. This isn't changing. This is what we've always done. We've always done this. It'll continue to do it in the future. But I see this AI disruption going to disrupt a lot of businesses in a lot of ways that we're not even aware of yet. If you don't have that fundamental knowledge of who you are and being able to redistribute that value creation into some other expression, you're going to be in trouble.
And that's why personal branding is the business model of the future, because the greatest point of security that you can have in a job, in your career, because even those of us who are entrepreneurs who own our own companies, we're not even safe. Look at Steve Jobs. He got ousted from his own company. So being who you are is your competitive advantage, right? So when you look at the who you are, what you know, and then how you express it through what you do, nobody can duplicate that. So can I introduce you to another model in a few minutes that is going to help people undertake an exercise to actually figure this out? So it's not just theory. But before we get into that, I want to address what you mentioned, Eric, because I think even if we're talking about in the accounting field, there's a societal expectation of what CPAs, chartered accountants, what bookkeepers and accountants, what they ought to look like, be like, act like, etc. Which is why I'm sure every time you meet somebody and you mention the accounting side of what you do, they're like, they give you a look, right? Which is like this, hello? Because here you are, Eric the Viking, fully self-expressed as the rocker, entrepreneur. You are the antithesis of what we know and believe accountants to be. And that's why you are the leader people want to follow. Because you are allowing them to see who you are, all facets of it, separate to anything to do with accounting. So you're already living and breathing it, and you're doing what maybe to you is intuitive and comes naturally. So now for people who are still trapped in the suit, looking, acting, and being like an accountant, we're talking to them to help free them from that prison to be who they are. And it won't look like you or sound like you. It'll be their own competitive advantage. And that's the whole thing. We spend our whole lives trying to fit in for the first half and the last half trying to stand out. If we only could teach our children today that their unique who they are is what will forevermore be their competitive advantage, wouldn't it be a different world we live in?
I keep thinking about this concept, especially in the accounting world, where we try and be the same, It's conformity, because that's what the Institute does. Conform. So it's all about what we do, not who we are. It's always about what we do. It's always about putting numbers in boxes. And I've always said that's the wrong way to look at it. You have to look at what the client's bigger, brighter future is and create solutions that help that person get their unique, bigger, brighter future. But doing the same thing all the time is going to get crushed by AI. So like this it's not going to help anybody to not truly stand out by being themselves. So I think there's multiple pressures coming in at it. One is, I think we're frustrated as a society, as human beings, is conforming all the time. We're getting frustrated by it. And the other part of it is that AI is going to penalize us for conforming, because conforming to trying to do the same thing every time by everybody, every single time over and over again, that's what a computer does. That's what AI will do. And it will just get rid of you. And I've been saying this for over a decade in the accounting profession, but now it's just starting to come to light, right? But in terms of, there's a beautiful, shall we call it, holistic messaging in here too, that who you are is why you were created. That's why the universe created you. And that's what I talk about in the Viking Academy as well. That's the big thing for me on that. That's the other business I have, is a Viking Academy. This is the whole point of the universe. It created you to be you, to fully express you. And that's what we hear in Strategic Coach as well. We run a unique ability. The more you can express who you are uniquely here, the more you express your unique self, the more value you're bringing to the world in the way the world needed you to be here.
Exactly. So for those of us, because I know Julia Waller has been a past guest on the show, who maybe don't have access to her or going through it, I want to introduce you to an exercise that people can undertake for themselves as a self-study listening to this podcast. So for those of you listening or watching, grab yourself a marker or a pen, grab yourself a blank sheet of paper, and Kamala Harris made this famous in her run for the presidency. We're going to draw a 4-circle Venn diagram. So this is what a 4-circle Venn diagram looks like. For those of you listening who are not actually able to see the screen, it's 4 overlapping circles where then in the center they cross over all and converge in one single point. Okay, so what we're going to write in each one of these circles will be something different. So on the top left circle, the top left quadrant, that's where we're going to put your innate giftings. So these are your factory settings as a human. So if you've ever taken the Colby assessment, Strengths Finder, you could even, if you wanted to, put your astrological sign and what that means in terms of like Krista the Aquarian, and how does that innate gifting, what are things about that make me, me? Then you also want to take a look at your values, is an important key part that is in the fixed quadrant of the factory settings that are in the top left.
Sorry, I got to follow you here. So we've got 4 circles right now, and it's got convergence.
We're only talking about the top left circle at this point. That's your innate.
Innate. Okay.
Yeah. And then the top right circle, because even though it's 4 circles, they kind of form a square. Yep. Top right circle is going to be learned. So the first one is innate. The second one is learned. And your learned is knowledge that you've acquired intellectually through education and self-study. So this is only the knowledge that has come in to this brain. So if we have 3 brains, you've got your mind, you've got your heart, and you've got your gut. We're only talking about the intellectual brain and knowledge that has come in through education and study. Then the third circle is your life experience, especially your adversity. And this is if you've gone through, you've had a loved one pass away, and a guy I was talking to today has had 5 family members, 4, including his son, pass away in a very short amount of time, like a year. So he became an expert in grief, not even knowing. He wasn't building expertise. He didn't go looking for that, but the life experience quadrant has given him that knowledge. So in the same way that the first quadrant is hardwired, the second one is learned, the third one is experienced with an ED. And then the bottom left quadrant is desire and calling. So inherently, innately, we are given these desires and callings. Sometimes we don't even understand what they are or why they're there. So for example, I grew up in a small blue-collar town in British Columbia, And yet I had this desire and calling toward luxury, like world-class 5-star luxury. And I was like, what is that? Because I didn't understand it, I pushed it away. And I pushed it away and I pushed it away until I was in my 20s. And finally, I was like, this thing will not let go of me. So I experienced my first ever 5-star world-class white glove luxurious experience. And all of a sudden, the lights went on. I already, could I train my team? How can I teach people to deliver white glove world-class service if I've never experienced it? So those desires and callings, they're put there for a reason. And it's our job to kind of figure out, because they lead us to our purpose, which is that circle in the center where the all four converge. That is ultimately that area, Eric, that we're talking about, that is who you were created to be and the life you were created to live. So if you think about the relationship between who you are and who you were created to be, and then your purpose on the planet, so many people go looking for purpose. Yet, as Buckminster or Bucky Fuller puts it, he has this concept called precession. Precession. If anybody wants to Google it and read the white paper, he's a mathematician, so it is not easy reading. But let me paraphrase it using an example he uses of a bee. So a bee is physiologically equipped. When you look at the bee's equipment, it has the physiological capability to extract nectar from flowers, right? Or honey, or you name it.
And that's the hardwired.
That's the innate.
That's the innate hardwired ability, right? Okay.
And somehow, and I'm going to botch this because I'm giving you the laygirl's term. I'm not giving you the scientific. But if we think about its knowledge, somehow, whether through observation or something, it figured out to go to a flower and learned how to actually use that equipment to extract it. So that's the learned knowledge. But then experientially, it tried on different things for size to figure out what fit. And then the desire and calling is the calling that the bee feels to go forth and drink the nectar. Yet its purpose. So Bucky Fuller says that your purpose in life is at a 90-degree angle to your passion or your bliss. So the bee is blissing out, going from flower to flower, having a great time, doing what it was put on earth to do. Yet its purpose is cross-pollination.
Can you say that again about the 90-degree angle to...
Exactly. And that's why he's a mathematician. This is like, it takes a little, but if you think about a bee is following its desire and calling, quadrant 3, and it's going forth, just blissing out, going from flower to flower. So it's doing what it was built to do and living the life it's created to live. But its purpose, as Steve Jobs said in that beautiful commencement address, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So the bee is just doing its thing and being who it was created to be, but its purpose is at a 90-degree angle to its bliss, which is drinking the nectar. The purpose is cross-pollination.
Right.
All the little sticky things that when it goes to one, then it goes to the other. That cross-pollination is why if bees went away, we would all die within some very short amount of time.
Right.
And so we as people, same thing with the personal brand, right? We have our innate gifts, our learned, our experience, and our desire and calling, which allows us to go forth into the world using that in service of humanity, doing what we love to do. That's why these cliches and universal truths of, follow your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. That's because when you do what you've been built to do, but then later, at a 90-degree angle, when you look back and connect the dots in reverse, you'll be able to see and discover what your purpose is versus going and looking for it, which is why it's so hard to find.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, because it's so close to you, you can't see it.
And because it's not always what we think it is.
Yeah.
Right? The impact of us just living our lives and being who we are. If we take Taylor Swift as an example, She's creating, she's just feeling the music and all these different influences that are coming together as she experiences her life, from country when she was a kid to R&B to like all the different genres, pop. And she's creating, yet she couldn't know until now that she's creating $5 billion of impact in the US economy every single year. The tour she just did, the Eras tour, is $1 billion tour. The impact, so her purpose is actually probably empowering the planet to win with positivity and love. But her purpose is unfolding. She's just being the bee doing what she's doing. And so for the accountants or the business owners, right, using the giftings of your innate, your learned, your experienced, and your desire and calling to go forth. So if you love numbers and you geek out on patterns and then accounting might actually be the right what you do. But if you love punk or you love rock and you're kind of alternative, then let it fly and express yourself physically by who you are, because you're going to attract a totally different customer to that business than if you were just kind of sitting in the suit and tie counting numbers, because that's not who you are. That's what you do. And there's a difference.
So here's where the interesting part for me comes back in, and we're treading quite heavily on the psychology and the sociology of all of this, is training ourselves to, or conditioning ourselves to fit in and to be part of and to be quote unquote traditionally successful, is, I think, a hardwired information system in our brains that's old software. Like, it's old software to fit in, because if you think about like a herd of animals going through Serengeti or whatever, the ones that are the outliers are the ones that are going to get eaten by the tigers and the hyenas. Those are the ones, everybody who stays in the center, in the middle, and that's the safety net. So there's we're social creatures, so therefore staying in the center is a survival technique. But it's like we're no longer in that world. We don't need to. So like we are like working on old software. We need a software upgrade, like a consciousness upgrade. And we talk about this, raising the level of consciousness of humanity is bringing it up another level. And it's almost like you can see the convergence of it happening from the business. Let's call it the material world on the outside is starting to squeeze us in to make us jump up in terms of consciousness. Because, for example, if you stay in the middle of the pack and you start, well, let's just be accountants and do everything faster, and let's get AI and blah, 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 blah. Pop. Next thing you know, you don't need the accountants anymore because AI is doing all the work.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And that's where, in the beginning, we just kind of glossed over it, and it was like a speed bump that we didn't stop at. But I referenced the 3 brains of your mind, your heart, and your gut. Because your mind is the one intellectually who wants to fit in. And you were even pointing to your head and talking about your brain and your mind when you were talking about that, reptilian desire or need that we have to fit in. But when you think of the word courage, because being ourselves is the greatest act of courage that we can be in this lifetime. And the root of the word cur, C-O-U-R, is Latin for heart. So we need to involve our hearts, our guts, and our minds in the decision-making process of how we're going to express in the world. But it has to have heart, and it needs courage, because it is counterintuitive and it feels scary to put ourselves out there and be who we are for fear of rejection. That's why courage isn't something that you come out of the womb having. It's a muscle that you build that you've got to exercise by taking small risks consistently over time. The compounding effect of your own empowerment leads you to be able to courageously, fearlessly say, this is who I am, even if it's untraditional. Because having the courage to do that ignites and empowers and liberates the people around you to do the same. and it attracts them to you. Because who do I want looking at my financials? If I'm an entrepreneur, even if I'm not alternative looking, do I want a guy in a suit who's putting numbers in boxes? Or do I want some creative guy who loves geeking out on numbers, who's going to apply that creative flair to my future and to what we're creating and building with my numbers? I want that guy.
Yeah.
Or girl or person.
Yeah. The stigma around, the accountant is, the broken glasses with the tape in the middle and sitting in the back room in the dark, just crunching numbers. And that's the processing side. That's all automated. That get taken care of. Like I've been saying this for years. I said, stop putting numbers in boxes. And that's the frustrating thing for me when I see business owners that are going in and working with accountants, and the accountants are not passionate about the person's life. Like, so for me, the one thing that I cared about when every client comes in is like, I want to know what you want. I'm passionate about it. It's like, I need to be connected to you and go, I want you to have your bigger, brighter future. So I was focused on your future. And then I would use my mind to come up with ideas to help you get there. But it's like, instead of leading with the mind, I had to lead with my heart first. So I actually care about you first as a person to see where you're going and what you want.
But that's because you're self-expressed authentically, which is why you're the host of this podcast. Because when you're in jail, if you're in prison, which the people in suits with the nooses around their neck, literally are in prison, because is that authentic to any person? I would argue probably not. But let's just imagine for a minute, you're in prison. Can you be a go-giver, how we left off the last episode, and be in service to the future and the brightness and the joy? Or are you just trying to figure out how to get out of prison? Your creativity is stifled the minute that you don the societal expectations because you're trapped inside. So a part of you, the creative piece of you, is dying. So it's hard to give it to somebody else when you can't even get that oxygen for your own self.
Yeah. It's interesting though, when I first got into the accounting profession, wearing the suit and tie, being in the office, having the big desk with the water, the water jugs in there, this big, that was the end all be all. That was you. Yeah. You've arrived now. You're somebody. You've got there. And then when I got there, there was still something missing for me. It was like, I can't put my finger on it, but I just kept feeling frustrated that I wasn't helping the people as much as I knew I could. There was something bugging me. It was like in my gut. We'll talk back into there. It was in my gut going, there's something wrong here. And it's not making my heart sing. And so I kept thinking and trying to find different ways to make it work better so that I could actually give the clients what they wanted. And that's when I came up with the accountant success formula. And then I started going, now I feel some energy here. Now people are starting to get results. Now we've removed some of these blockers out of the way. And now I was starting to fully express, I guess, the reason why I was here, the purpose for me to be here, right? To transform that space.
And that's why we're ever evolving. So in that model from last episode where we have the arrow going through, because when you got to the big office and all those things, with all the love in my heart, I'm not saying this as a criticism, you were likely deeply in your ego. And then right? Because that's what resonated in that moment. And then as you started to progress along your life path and you started to evolve and grow, you're like, deepers, all the trappings of what society tells me I should want when I achieve them, there's a hollow something missing. And this is where the midlife crisis comes in. Because if I were a betting girl, I don't know any science, this is just Krista's armchair philosophy, the size of the crisis, some people, they just go and buy a new sports car. Other people, they upend their entire lives and they're unrecognizable. I feel like the ratio of the size of the lie you're living is probably pretty equal to the size of the crisis that you undergo in terms of your transformation.
Then I was living a pretty big lie, because I know that my midlife crisis I'll put plurals in there, were massive, and there was a lot of changes and upheavals. It's really curious, to think that this is what I thought was going to give me fulfillment. And I have this business and I started it. And if there's any business owners out there that resonate with this, if there's something that's bugging you and it's kind of gnawing at you and you're like, I just feel frustrated. I'm not able to fully express and get what I want done, even though on the outside, people think you're successful, quote, let's use our air quotes again, that, air quoting, that I'm successful. Am I really? I'm not. I wasn't. Not until I guess I was working in my authentic self, like in who I am, like what I am, or right? That's the bottom line, is what I am. And
that gut feeling you had,
yeah,
that's the desire and calling that's innately within you. That's quadrant 4, because you can feel something's not right, even if you don't know what it is. Knowing and witnessing that is there is your first step to exploring where to go and what it means and what it's all about. So for anybody listening to this who just has a feeling, a hunch, a sense that who they are living is not aligned with who they were created to be in the life they were created to live, explore where it takes you. Start asking the questions and just see where it leads. It doesn't mean you need to do a full 180 upheaval of your life. It might be a couple of small changes, but even small changes at the core can lead to really big trajectory changes in the result.
You said something in the beginning here. You said that, which obviously should be the title of this podcast, which is personal branding is the business model of the future. And that's what you truly believe. That's the business model of the future. What other impacts do you see this personal branding being the leading why?
Well, because the who you are is the most long-standing, unchanging. But the world you live in is changing very quickly, especially in the modern day. So if we can be grounded in who we are, you know how Shakespeare says, to thine own self be true. And one of his other laws is know thyself. Well, that is because trust and being able to trust yourself, that gut feeling, that doesn't happen overnight. So every moment that we start to know ourselves more deeply, as if we want to use the language personal brands, the who we are, what we know, and what we're going to do in this lifetime, the more knowledge that we gain, the more trust we have with ourselves. And the more we trust ourselves, the more confident we are to take bigger risks. And so this idea of getting to know yourself so that then you can lean into your intuition as you're observing the world around you to say, oh, that's interesting. By me, like, this is a new way I can use who I am in the ever-changing world. Versus if you don't know yourself and you even, any sides of the triangle, if you're unaware, you're going to have a very hard time being able to navigate in an ever-changing world, because you'll always be grasping for external versus finding the power within.
Reflecting back on all the trials and tribulations I've had, the different businesses I've started and failed, and the tests and tries and the experience side, right? I'm going to go back to my circle here on my life experience. I'm really looking on that and what I've learned. I have way more confidence today than I've ever had to take even more risks, right? And that's why, starting up another platform altogether, the Viking Academy, was a complete risk. It's a complete divestiture from business and coaching and finance. It's exploring the mind, body, and spirit. It's a complete shift away from the hard, here's the numbers world. But I've never been more courageous to do that. And I become even more confident in that. And my expression of that is coming out into the world in different ways. And I'm creating more value. And if it doesn't work, I'm not concerned. Like, I remember when I started my first business, if it collapsed, it was part of my identity. It was part of who I was. instead of it's just, this is an expression of what I'm doing. And if it goes away, that's fine. I'm just going to find a new way to express myself. And for those business owners out there who, gone through bankruptcy or divorce or, separations in business, like I've gone through all of this. I haven't gone through bankruptcy, but I've gone through separation. I've gone through business, divorce and business failures. You know that you've been able to come back and redo it again. So you get more and more confidence as you go along. Do you see this? Do you see it happening? Is going to be happening even more and more because of the changing landscape in the business world? Because we're just, like we talked about, my daughter is going to have to probably go through 2 or 3 different, or whatever they think is like 6 different careers in a lifetime. What they used to say when we were younger, it was probably going to be even more now.
It could be infinite.
Yeah.
It may not even be, the career word may just come to mean the body of work over your lifetime. The word career, right now, we believe that to be vocation. But my belief is that the transformation of even the word career will come to mean the body of work that you create in this lifetime. That is what your career will be.
I love that definition. That is the bomb right there. That's, for me, the big takeaway here. Think about that. And because before it was who I was attached to being a partner in the first accounting firm. And when that partnership imploded, who I was completely got shattered.
Correct.
That was a career, but that was just one.
That was one thing. Exactly. And when that went away, the whole rest of your empire remained intact when you're using that first business model from the first episode where we flipped the model. You and who you are is at the top. The arrow of your evolution runs through the middle. And then these things, what you do that are the bubbles down below in that diagram, these are the coming and goings. So Eckhart Tolle talks about, he wishes how kids would realize or be taught how life is like soap bubbles. It's here, then it's gone. And it's here, and it's gone. It's continuously moving in and out of form. And that would be my hope and wish more than anything, is that we can find grounding, confidence, and trust in who we are. We can evolve and grow because we're not staying the same. And that the body of work that becomes our career will evolve along with us. And it will become this evolutionary expression of who we are at the different times, phases, and stages and seasons of our lives.
That's beautiful. I love that. That is such more of a bigger, broader picture of your entire life. So these are just, I had a career in this, then I had a career in that, then I had a career in that. Get rid of that verbiage and say, my whole life is a career of creating value in the world. These were just the unique expressions. I used to work as a dishwasher at a restaurant. Then I became a server at the restaurant. Then I became a cook at a different company. I was working in construction for a while. I did some accounting. I did that. Those aren't separate careers. My whole life is the career.
There's seasons of your life. And during that season, different things were important to you, and that thereby you created a different expression. So when we were talking about the be all end all, going to the office with the water coolers and all the things, that was the expression in that season. But remembering you're an evolving human being who's changing and growing and learning and applying that knowledge to ever be more conscious of who you want to become in your next season. And then having the courage to realign your life with the season you're in and heading into, there, in my opinion, is one of the greatest challenges for human beings, is having that courage to completely, go like this and like put it into a ball, what you did previously, throw it over your shoulder and create anew.
As the Buddhist teaches, non-attachment, right? Life is suffering according to the Buddha, which is the more you attach to things, that's when you suffer. When you non-attach. So I love the idea of taking here's the page. This is, okay, that was crop out of the ball, throw it over your shoulder and keep going. Like there's the next phase. And so for any business owners out there listening to this, if you're afraid of AI coming, you're afraid of disruption, all the rest of that stuff, I hope this podcast has helped you kind of understand that the true value that you will always keep is you. You are the value that you're bringing, and you're maybe going to bring it to a new expression. If your company doesn't make it and it fails, so be it. That's that season. It's done. Now open up, go to the new chapter, and look at it from a totally different paradigm as you being the personal brand, which is, again, I love this. You said the personal brand is the business model of the future. So embrace that business model, and it never fails because it continually evolves itself, regardless of how the expression is. So that business was gone. This has been fantastic. I love this reframe, Krista. This is great.
Well, and can I give you one last tool before we wrap?
Oh, please.
Because I think that the three critical, what I call Krista's three critical questions, are really, really important as you evolve and grow. Because these are questions you will continue to ask yourself as you approach new seasons of your life. In fact, you can incorporate them into your quarterly planning, annual planning, monthly, whatever works in terms of the strategy that you employ. But question number one, we can think of questions 1 and 2 as if they're in an infinity loop. So question 1 on one side is, what life do I want to lead? And this is, again, asking this question for you as an individual human. This is not asking it through the lens of your company. So question 1, what life do I want to lead? And then on the other side of the infinity loop is, what business do I want to be in? And again, this is when you as a human wake up in the morning and you have, in air quotes, working hours in your day. What do you want to spend your life creating in this season? That's the business you want to be in. And the reason it's in an infinity loop is that every lifestyle decision you make has a business implication, and every business decision you make has a lifestyle implication. So when we decided we wanted to sell off our lives and move to Africa, that's a lifestyle decision. Well, that meant, and very fortunately, the dream was already in my heart, so I had aligned my life and I went virtual in 2008. But that meant that the business I was going to be in needed to be global and it needed to be virtual. So getting those two sides of the infinity loop harmonized. And then critical question number 3 is, who do you want to serve? And the most important thing in my belief system is that who we want to serve, our ideal target audience, is a former version of ourselves. So when we think about the struggling Eric, when you go back in your life to those times where you were struggling, you had problems, well, those 4 quadrants of your innate learned experience and desire calling creates the who you are, that equips you to serve and support the former version of yourself. And when you can combine all of who you are, what you know, and then express that in the what you do to that target customer, there is no better person on the planet that can serve and support them. You become a blue ocean company of one. There's no competition.
And I'm so glad you said that as soon as you said the last question, my face lit up like a Christmas tree, because I've been thinking about that over and over again. Is the accountant that I was trying to help with the accountant success formula was a former version of myself. That was who it is. I'm here to serve my past self, right? My past self. I'm here to serve my past self. And there's a whole nother rabbit hole I can go down there in terms of everyone we meet as our past, present, or future self, but we won't go there. That's for the Viking Academy podcast. We can talk about that on that one. But just to realize that was the actual person I was trying to serve made it so much easier, because then I was just talking to myself, kind of, in all the conversations and the marketing. It was just, I'm talking to me. So I'm not in competition with anybody, because I'm only going to listen to a future version of me. The past version of me will only listen to the future version of me.
And isn't it a beautiful thing to know that you can show up in the world and get paid to be who you are? You don't need to prepare. When you are with the who you want to serve, that is a former version of yourself, and you combine your innate, your learned, your experienced, and your desire and calling, there's no prep needed. You get to show up and riff, and it will be the greatest value that your audience has ever received, because it's like, you know me, you know what's in my head, you know the problems I'm experiencing, and you have the answers in a way that nobody else can provide. And that's personal branding at its best.
I love it. I love it. So for our listener there, we've got personal branding is the business model of the future. We walked through the 4 circles of the hardwired, the learned, the experience, and the desires to get your core. What was the center of the circles? What did you call it?
Even though you can only connect the dots of your purpose looking backwards, ultimately, those 4 quadrants where they cross over gives you the starting point to go forth and get the car on the road and be doing all the things. And from there, you're going to be using your guidance of your brain, your heart, and your gut to steer you, to get you ever closer to the target, so that when you drop into what Julia Waller calls your unique ability, once you're living in that place, you know. And then when you live in that place for a consistent period of time and you look back over your shoulder, then you can connect the dots and see what the purpose actually is.
Right, right. And then look at those 3 critical questions at the end there. What life do I
always keep looking? Because if you remember the arrow through the first model, you're going to evolve and change. So a year from now, if you ask those 3 questions, the answer might be very different than what they would be today.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, your innate, your learned, your experience, and your desire and calling, those things, you collect new things into your toolkit that you add to those 4 circles. But then when you apply them through the 3 critical questions, then you really start to make it stick.
We're actually, my wife and I are going through that question of question 1 and 2, like what life do we want to lead and what business do we want to be in? It's starting to evolve a little bit because we have some lifestyle choices we want to change. And by changing that, you got to change kind of the business model that you're in. So we're right.
And to some degree, the who you want to serve also evolves and grows with that. And so you can kind of think, you've heard me say a number of times that my goal is ultimately to help people be who they were created to be and to live the life you were created to live. So you can almost think of the 4-circle Venn diagram as helping you be the person you were created to be. And then the 3 critical questions help you live the life you were created to live. And then you marry those 2 together, and that forms your personal brand, who you are, and the ever-evolving career that is the body of work you'll create in this lifetime.
And right there is the mic drop. Krista, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. There you go. That was part 2 of personal branding. I'm so glad we did the second part because this is really powerful. This is incredible. Thank you.
So the privilege and the honor to serve you in your full way is literally all I. And there was a mic drop, literally.
I love it. Was a mic.
My headphone fell out of my ear. There you go.
There's a mic drop. KristaClivesmith.com. Go check it out. Krista, thanks for being on the podcast.
If you're a business owner or CPA who believes the accounting profession has let you down, then please reach out to us at www.mbacpa.ca so we can have a chat to see if we're a fit to work together. We're always looking forward to talking to you. See you next time.